Thank you very much indeed. I think after that introduction I should maybe have entitled my speech that gas is our wife, not our girlfriend, but perhaps it's good that I didn't. So what is the government's vision for gas? Some say that the government is anti-gas, that we ignore the potential for shale gas, and in our desperate headlong rush for renewables and nuclear, we are just not seeing gas as playing an important role at all. Others say that the government is too pro-gas, that actually we're turning our back on our carbon ambitions in our desire to see a greater role for gas in the energy mix. And others say, well, it doesn't really matter what government thinks, because whatever we think, our policies aren't going to deliver what we want anyway. I'm going to explain that I think all those views are wrong. I'm going to explain how government actually sees the role for gas. As has been said, my name is Barton. I look after international and domestic energy security issues in DECC. I'm going to speak for about 15 minutes, and then after the next speaker, I'll be happy to take questions. I'd like to start by celebrating the role of gas in our energy mix today. You'll know the statistics better than me. About a third of our overall energy comes from gas. Over 40% of our electricity comes from gas. Over 70% of our heat comes from gas. Without gas, the UK would be cold and it would be dark. But is that a good thing? Yes, in my opinion, and I'll give you 4 reasons why. The first reason is that gas is reliable. There's lots of it. 130 years worth of conventional gas, perhaps double that if you include unconventional. We have competitive, open market systems that have delivered a 500% increase in import infrastructure over the last decade, a 30% increase in storage. The EU is following our lead in liberalisation. Our system has showed itself repeatedly to be robust to external shocks. So gas is reliable. Secondly, gas is relatively clean. It isn't a form of renewables or low carbon energy, that's true, but with emissions of gas power stations being around half of those from coal, the growth of gas generation in the UK over the last decade has been a huge boon to our climate goals. Thirdly, gas is currently cheaper than alternatives. Not as cheap as we'd all like, and not as cheap as it has been. But it is still one of the cheapest forms of heating for homes, particularly for those connected to the grid, and for electricity it is flexible and has low fixed costs, and it is quick to build. And finally, fourthly, and very importantly, gas creates huge wealth and jobs. North Sea production has delivered an enormous amount of employment, of tax revenue and growth. It will continue to do so, even as overall production falls, and UK shale gas seems to be opening up new opportunities. So we can celebrate the role of gas today. And as we'll see, I think we can also celebrate the role of renewables and the role of nuclear alongside it. But can we celebrate the role of gas in the future? 3 doubts. First doubt, on the demand side, can we continue to use gas if we're serious about tackling climate change? Yes, gas is less CO2 intensive than coal, but it's considerably more CO intensive than nuclear or renewables. Is continued use of gas consistent with protecting the planet? Second doubt, on the supply side, our import dependence is rising rapidly as North Sea production falls. Is continued use of gas consistent with our energy security goals? And third, if the answer to 1 and 2 is yes, will the policy and wider environment allow gas to play the role it needs to? Well, let me address each of those 3 doubts. We'll start with demand. Can we be pro-gas while protecting the planet? Let's think first for heat. Our plans for meeting our renewable energy targets envisage 12% of our heat coming from renewables by 2020, and that is an enormous growth from where we are today. But it still leaves nearly 90% of our heat coming from other sources, mostly gas. Our carbon plan showed nearly half of our heat still coming from gas by 2030, and the Climate Change Committee rather more. So yes, the government has huge ambition for renewable heat, and is going to grow enormously over the coming decades. But yes, too, natural gas is likely to continue to play a leading role in heat supply cost effectively well into the 2020s and a significant, albeit lesser role, thereafter. What about electricity? Well, our 2020 plans are for renewable electricity to meet not just 12%, but 30% or more of our electricity. And we're seeking to ensure new nuclear build and coal CCS. What's left for gas? Well, rather a lot, actually. We'll need gas to replace the nearly 20 gigawatts of coal and nuclear generation that's due to close in the next decade. We need gas to enable that deployment of 30% renewable electricity, providing backup for when the wind doesn't blow. And we'll need gas to help power the doubling of electricity that we expect by 2050 as we move to a more electrified heat and transport system. So unabated gas will continue to play a key role in our electricity mix alongside other low-carbon electricity sources well into and beyond 2020. Our carbon plan projects some 10 to 20 gigawatts of new gas generation coming online in the next 2 decades, and its role will not be restricted to providing backup to renewables. So yes, we are absolutely committed to meeting our statutory carbon budgets. Yes, this will mean a reduction in the share of unabated gas in the long term. And yes, the precise share of gas will depend on its relative cost effectiveness with other fuels and the rate of deployment of those. But our modelling suggests that unabated gas is likely to retain a significant role to 2030 and beyond, and that this is consistent with our carbon goals. It is not a dash for gas, as is sometimes projected, but rather a policy of developing a diverse, secure and sustainable energy portfolio. And with CCS, gas will be able to play a role in the longer term too. So can we be pro-gas while protecting the planet? Yes, so long as we're also pro-renewables and pro-nuclear alongside it. What about the supply side? Can we be pro-gas without compromising our energy security? Or if you like, from the other side, does shale gas mean that all our energy security concerns are over? Well, there's a mixed picture. On the one hand, our gas import dependency is going to rise. Gas demand will be flattish in the medium term, while North Sea production will fall. Can UK shale gas reverse the trend? Well, the short answer is, we don't know, and neither does anyone else know. And we certainly don't think that we can assume it will. Yes, there are some eye-popping figures around in terms of the potential for shale gas deposits in the UK, and we would be delighted to see UK shale gas production, provided this can be done in an environmentally responsible and secure manner. But we just don't know yet what scale of shale gas production might be economic, if indeed it's economic at all in the UK context. And once again, neither does anyone else. This is not to downplay the significant economic and energy security benefits that will come from the continued production from the North Sea, nor the potential of UK shale gas to contribute very positively to that. Please don't hear me as being anti-shale gas. We're not, despite what you might read in the papers. But we must recognise that there is huge uncertainty, and except on the most optimistic scenarios, our gas import dependency will rise. So does that matter? Well, not necessarily. Yes, we'll need more imports, but we think we're very well placed to secure those imports. The UK has extensive import infrastructure, over 150% of UK demand. We have diverse sources from the North Sea, from Norway, from the EU interconnectors, LNG, storage, demand-side response. We have a flexible and commercially attractive gas market. Studies have consistently shown that we are resilient in the gas sector to all but the most extreme supply disruptions, and history has proven that to be the case too. Internationally, we have seen good, if not speedy, liberalisation in the EU gas market. And on that point, may I take this opportunity to say a big thank you to the Gas Forum for the enormous and invaluable role you're playing in shaping the EU gas network codes. I know it's difficult, it's technical, and it's voluminous work. But without your expertise, experience and engagement, we will be a lot further back in terms of creating a genuine single market in the EU. So thank you. We've also seen rapid growth in LNG trade, and we've seen vast and diverse sources of gas reserves, both conventional and unconventional. When we look at the global gas supply outlook, it's broadly benign. And yet, within the UK, we face new pressures from the increased import dependency that I've spoken about, from increased intermittency of gas demand on the electricity side as greater levels of wind are deployed onto the system, from decreased demand-side flexibility as we see closure of coal power stations. Disruptions to particular sources of gas supply can happen, and they do happen. Internationally, gas demand is set to rise significantly, perhaps 50% by 2035. And although there are plenty of gas reserves, extracting them is a different matter. Gas markets are still far from perfect. So while our physical gas security is high, we cannot be complacent. That is why we're best off with a balanced energy portfolio in the future, including renewables, including nuclear, but with gas still playing a key part. That is also why we've asked Ofgem to look into the case for further interventions to enhance our gas security. What about shale gas again? Okay, it may be early days in the UK, but it's been transformational in the US. Doesn't that meet our energy security concerns? Well, yes, US unconventional gas has indeed had a profound impact on US gas prices, but we do not think that will be mirrored in the UK. Why? Because of rigidities in international gas markets, because of limitations on US gas exports, because of the costs of liquefaction, transportation and regasification of US gas, and because US gas prices are probably unsustainable at the moment anyway. So we do not expect US unconventional gas to bring US gas prices to the UK. What about unconventional gas elsewhere? Well, again, there are some eye-popping figures around, but the extent, timing and costs of exploitation remain highly uncertain. We can't just cut and paste the US experience elsewhere. Geology is different, population density is different, land rules are different, environmental regulation is different, and supply chains are different. So yes, unconventional gas is a huge positive if it's exploited responsibly. And it may bring big price reductions in the future. But there are huge uncertainties. Global gas demand is rising rapidly, and therefore most central forecasts point to gas prices remaining high out to 2030. Of course, they may be wrong, but these views make clear that we shouldn't assume in our energy policy that gas prices will necessarily be cheap in the future. So we have our energy security and supply side analysis leading us to the same position as our low carbon and demand side analysis, which is that yes, gas has and will continue to have a major role in our energy mix, but we shouldn't become over-dependent on it. The role of gas sits alongside renewable electricity and heat, nuclear and other low-carbon sources, not instead of them. We need a diversity, not over-reliance on any one fuel. That makes sense for our climate goals, it makes sense for our security goals, and it makes sense for our economic and affordability goals. So finally, and more briefly, will our policy deliver this? Well, I think I'll have to leave you disappointed in terms of detail, because much is due to be announced later this year. But the broad parameters are clear. Our gas generation strategy will set out the role we see for gas in the electricity mix and how we will seek to enable this. Our electricity market reforms, in particular the capacity mechanism, will provide the incentives for sufficient gas and other generation build to maintain our energy security. Our heat strategic framework document this year will be followed by policy proposals next year covering all forms of heating, from renewables to gas-fired CHP to more efficient gas boilers. Our carbon budgets, our emissions performance standard, and our support for renewables and nuclear will ensure that this is all consistent with our carbon goals. And our work to enable cost-competitive CCS deployment, investing £1 billion in a first demonstration project, and importantly ensuring this is open to gas, should enable extensive use of gas in the longer term to 2050 and beyond. And we'll be announcing our conclusions on whether fracking for shale gas should be allowed to restart in the UK, and if so, what new controls are needed. And finally, Ofgem's significant code review reforms and any policies flowing from their further measures reports will, in our view, enhance our gas security, as will our continued international work to encourage sustainable conventional and unconventional gas production, to strengthen our bilateral trading links with key supply countries, and supporting efforts to liberalise and further integrate EU gas markets. So what is the government's vision for gas in conclusion? Well, we see gas as playing a key role in our energy mix now and long into the future. We see this role as complementary to that of our carbon goals and complementary to the role of renewables and nuclear, not in conflict with them. It is not either or, but both. And we're putting in place the policy framework to allow gas to play this role. Thank you very much.